Welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Southeastern 14 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Blake Lovell is with me. Barry Allen is with me. We are going to talk some baseball and basketball today. Let's start with basketball, however, where Blake Lovell, we've got more news because it's basketball and there's news every day.
Yeah, we got news at Georgia. Two more players leaving, and that puts the Bulldogs in an interesting spot at this point. I don't know the exact. I'd have to I'm trying to remember who left and who hasn't left at this point. But I think they've lost close to 6 of their top 8 scorers at this point. You know, we've talked about Severe Wheeler, Kamara, Justin Kier, Fagan. Now you add Katie Johnson and Andrew Garcia to the mix, who are both transferring. Johnson was the one that we were really looking at and saying, all right, well, even with all these guys leaving, they'll be able to lean on him. Well, not so much anymore because he is transferring, averaged 13.5 points per game last year. Garcia averaged 8.7 points per game last year, and they are both headed out. So Georgia's lost pretty much their entire rotation at this point. They brought in some guys, not to say that they're not bringing in talent, but boy, they have lost a lot from last season's roster, which, I guess when you think about it, they weren't a great team last year, but still, you had some pretty talented players on there. So that is going to be an interesting situation based on what we've talked about with Tom Crean's, status there and that kind of stuff. Because at this point, we talked about the battle at the bottom. I mean, Georgia, they're probably the team at the bottom right now, them and some of the others we mentioned, because I just think they've turned their roster over so much. They've got some talented kids coming in, but man, it's going to be seemingly an uphill battle for them unless they can really sort of overhaul some things pretty quickly. And then Arkansas, what do you know, picks up another good transfer, and what do you know as well, comes from within the SEC. They got Jackson Robinson, former top 75 recruit who was at Texas A&M, and now he leaves and hits to Arkansas. So that gives Muss another talented guard, perimeter player to work with. Arkansas just getting stronger, and unfortunately Georgia really got a lot to figure out here when it comes to their roster.
Katie Johnson was probably their second or third best player at worst when he played.
Oh, I mean, he was their second best player, I think, without question. Because, he was right behind Severe Wheeler, just in terms of you kind of look at it overall. But I think it's up to, I want to say it's 8 or 9 now, maybe, to leave the roster from last season, I believe. If you just kind of, again, it's hard to keep up with, as we talked about, but he is, it's just one of those. And I think it was kind of one of those things that people had probably thought was going to happen. But man, he was, he's someone you could have really built your roster around heading into the season, knowing how many guys that you were going to lose. But I think this is sort of the situation where PJ Horn, I guess it's like I'm going up and down the roster. Like, I think PJ Horn's really the only guy that played significant minutes from last year, who is coming back. So it's going to be difficult. And like I said, they are bringing in several guys, but I just think that they're going to have to figure a lot of things out if they're going to be beyond that bottom 4 probably next season.
Yeah, I don't know how this works for Tom Crean at this point, because the record so far has not been good. And I know that he didn't take over an ideal situation, although I guess Mark Fox, in hindsight, I think did a much better job there than he got credit for. But he's already a little bit underwater. Next year is going nowhere, and you just reach a point where the losses start to pile up to a point where you don't know how this works, right? Because the fan base is not going to be happy. It's hard to get recruiting momentum. I just don't see how Tom Crean pulls this out.
Well, it's an interesting quote from him, too. Whenever Katie Johnson decided to transfer, and I'm reading this from UGA Sports, which is the rival site. It says that although he wished Johnson well, in a statement released to UGA Sports, Crean was simultaneously displeased by how this event transpired. And here's Crean's quote. Given the standards and expectations of Georgia basketball, we wholeheartedly agree with KD's desire to seek a new program. We certainly wish him the best and really hope he finds success in all areas moving forward. Like, to me, that's like that first sentence is sort of like one of those things where it's like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't, you don't know what happened there, but it's, yeah, I'm not sure because we talked about the Mark Fox thing, and I always said he was kind of one of those guys that you never felt like you were in a situation where you were going to really bottom out as a program with him. Now, maybe you weren't going to reach that level you wanted to, which is the level that everyone wants to reach at this point. But still, I mean, it's a challenge too, because I mean, we have to remember the SEC has gotten so much better. The majority of Mark Fox's years there, like the SEC, was certainly not as strong as it is now. So that is always going to be the problem, is when you have this kind of, exodus the way they have. I don't. It's not easy to quickly make up for it, and we always use Vanderbilt as the excuse or the example of what things can look like when your program starts going in the wrong direction in a hurry. And you hope for Georgia that's not going to be a similar case here. But right now, if you compare Georgia's roster next season to maybe some of the others, I have no doubt that Tom Crean will probably make it work with some of the talented guys he has coming in. But if you just compare them to some of the others, you're probably going to be quick to give the nod to a lot of the other teams in the SEC versus them right now.
That reads a whole lot like "Don't let the door hit you on the way out."
Yeah, it didn't seem like the most pleasant of yeah, it just didn't. So again, there's obviously more to that, and like I mentioned, it wasn't necessarily something that came completely out of the blue. I think it had been talked about, that this could be a possibility, but anyway, slice it. Still, you're losing your second best player, and Severe Wheeler is. I guess I'm not even sure when Severe Wheeler's making his decision, but like we talked about, he may be headed back into the SEC, but I think as of right now, if you look at it, it looks like Kentucky may actually be the team that winds up with Severe Wheeler, which wouldn't that be something? So,
yeah, that would be something indeed. Any other thoughts on hoops before we turn to baseball?
Nope, I think that's the news of the day in basketball, which, as we know, there's always that situation now with everything, the transfer portal. But yeah, that's the most notable stuff.
Barry Allen, let's flip to baseball. The news that just got everybody's attention yesterday, word out of Oxford, unfortunately, Gunnar Hoglund's season is over. He's going to be getting Tommy John surgery. I think he will still be taken in the first round. I think most people would agree with that. But that's a huge loss for an Ole Miss team that just has not been able to get all its key guys healthy all year, and now it is down possibly its best player.
Yeah, they've had so many injuries all year. It's just hard to overcome the injuries they've had to, the people that they've had. I mean, they've missed Elko for a long time. He's back as a hitter, but not playing every day right now. And the position that he's playing, and, Nikhazy's missed some time. Schottenjay's missed, a ton of games early in the year with an injury. And then they get this, happen to them, at Texas A&M this past weekend. I mean, Hoglund missed a start with LSU, had some forearm stiffness, and then pitched really well against South Carolina, came back, retired 18 of the 19 batters he faced the next week, and then didn't feel comfortable in the bullpen last week at A&M, but they checked him out. They ran a bunch of tests on him, did some things on him, stuff you can do at the game. He felt good, just had a little stiffness in the pen, and then he went out in the first inning, and it just didn't go well, and they took him out, and unfortunately they've since found out he's going to have Tommy John surgery. Dr. James Andrews is going to do that on May the 18th, and his season's over. Usually a year to come back from this. Although people have done it. It's been done, and certainly it's not, his career's not over. But, it's going to be a tough blow for Ole Miss. I mean, some notable guys that's had this happen, and you can tell me if these guys are struggling today or not, but Jacob deGrom and Steven Strasburg and Adam Wainwright and some Hall of Fame dude named John Smoltz didn't exactly doom their career. So it's not doom and gloom for Hoglund, but certainly it is, maybe for this year and for Ole Miss, and what that would mean for them going forward. His kid was a first-round draft pick out of high school, decided to go to school, similar to the path that JT Ginn took at Mississippi State. First rounder, went to school, had an injury and dropped, 30 spots in the draft after a couple of years at Mississippi State. So a tough blow for him, personally for him, and a tough blow for Ole Miss. And hopefully he can bounce back and be the guy that he once was. But what does that mean for Ole Miss going forward? They've had their pitching issues anyway, with Derek Diamond struggling a little bit on the weekends, and McDaniel coming in and taking over. That probably, to me, looks like that's where they're going to have to go, and have McDaniel and Diamond pitching the 2 and 3 spot, either way, and move Nikhazy to the number 1 spot, for the last 2 weekends against Vanderbilt and Georgia. So we'll see how Mike Bianco handles that and how that works out for Ole Miss. But certainly a team snake bit by a lot of injuries this year, and that one really hurts because he's not only one of the best pitchers that Ole Miss has, but he's one of the best pitchers in the league and in the country.
Yeah, one of the most similar situations I remember to this was Walker Buehler in 2015. He's pitching that deciding game in the College World Series. He's not exactly himself. He leaves the start early, gives up a home run to Pavin Smith, who's now with the Diamondbacks. And sure enough, the draft comes, and he's, I think, taken 18th by the Dodgers. Although I guess they drafted him before that start. But the Dodgers drafted him, I think, suspecting maybe something is up. And, of course, he misses the next year, builds his arm back, comes back. But the point is he didn't drop out of the first round. And, of course, Walker Buehler has gone on to be one of the probably most talented starting pitchers in Major League Baseball. I don't know that we'd say one of the best yet because he's still pretty young, but I think that career is headed that way. I'm looking at Ole Miss's conference-only stats. Diamond has a 5.04 ERA in 30 1/3 innings, 8 appearances, 5 starts. McDaniel, a 6.21 in 29 innings, 20 earned runs given up in that span, 10 appearances, 5 starts. So the issue with Ole Miss, and I know Diamond had one really good start, if I remember that correctly, but this is a team that really has got an issue with guys throwing effectively and throwing it linked, which I think that the guy who's got the 4.5 to 5 ERA, who can give you 5-6 innings and give you that consistently, giving up maybe 3 runs, is kind of underrated in this league because most teams don't have a second or especially a third guy like that. So I see this really, not only do you lose your best starter, but all of a sudden you're starting to tax a bullpen too with the dominoes that fall that already is struggling.
Yeah, they've used a lot of guys in the league, but only four pitchers have started for them on the weekend, being Nikhazy, Hoglund, Diamond, and McDaniel. And they all, McDaniel has double-digit appearances. He has 5 starts and 5 relief appearances. And Broadway has 14 relief appearances with 7 saves, but he has 2 losses and a 3.48 earned run average and more hits allowed than innings pitched. And then after that, it's just kind of really dicey for them. Diamond's 8 appearances, 5 starts, the 5.04 ERA, and then the ERAs. I mean, that's the lowest ERA among guys who have 5 appearances, in the league. Then it just, keeps going up for Wes Burton to 6.14, McDaniel 6.21, Tyler Myers 7.56, Austin Miller 7.71, and then, Jackson Kimbrell and Josh Mallett's, turning in AM radio ERAs at 16.20 and 1,800. So it's just kind of, those are kind of tough things to overcome. You've got to find somebody out of that. Broadway's been really good. He's had some bad outings, but he's been really good for the most part. Jack Doherty has only made 4 appearances, has 8 innings. That may be somebody that they could turn to. McDaniel, we talked about it. Myers is a veteran. Miller's a veteran. two guys that's made 15 combined appearances, but, giving up 22 hits in 17 innings. And, they walked 11 in 17. They walked 7. Myers has only walked 1 in 8 innings, 6 walks for Miller in 9 innings. But those are going to be some guys they're going to have to lean on down the stretch, particularly this weekend against Vanderbilt. They have a game tonight, which is a Wednesday game. So that makes it tough because now you got to use a bullpen tonight and only get 1 day rest for Vanderbilt on Friday. They were supposed to play last night against Little Rock, but weather forced that to move the game to today. So they'll be in a little bit of a pickle, tonight and then having to turn around Friday and play again. They're going to really, manage their pitching and manage their bullpen. They're going to need somebody to go out tonight against Little Rock and give them 4 or 5 good innings in a start. They probably don't want to use 6, 7, 8 guys. Might have to, but that's probably not something that they want to do tonight with Vanderbilt coming in.
If I'm Ole Miss and I'm trying to check the weather forecast, I am really hoping for a rain out tonight for all the reasons you just mentioned.
Well, it's raining here now, and I'm in Tuscaloosa, and it usually whatever's going on in Mississippi is moves this way. They're saying our weather forecast here today is supposed to be clear and maybe even some possible sunshine, by the afternoon. Maybe they'll do that. It wouldn't be unprecedented for a team to, cancel a midweek game, for whatever reasons. It's happened before. I think Ole Miss canceled a game, earlier this year with La Tech. They played the Tuesday game, but they said the Wednesday game was canceled because of COVID. Just looking at Ole Miss, they'll be in the 60s and partly cloudy by lunchtime, so they should be able to play. And Alabama's had 3 midweek games that mysteriously were canceled, including last week including last night with UAB and last week with Samford. So I guess teams can do that, and that may be something that they want to look at and not play Little Rock tonight and try to have a rested bullpen and be ready for Vanderbilt this weekend. It certainly wouldn't be unprecedented the way things have gone, this year in the league with teams, not playing, games in the midweek. I guess, for whatever reasons, COVID or weather, they say weather maybe, or, lack of pitching. I don't think anybody's ever said that, but I think a lot of people assume, you assume that when you see games are canceled. And so maybe they'll go that route tonight, and maybe they won't. Maybe they feel like they need to try to get some guys out there and get them in some situations and say, this guy's made 1 appearance. We're going to run him out there. We may need him Saturday against Vanderbilt, and just kind of see how that goes.
The issue for the Rebels, not hard to identify, and some of this is maybe the ballpark too, but home runs allowed. Diamond 6 and 30 and a third SEC innings. McDaniel 8 and 29. That's hard to do when you're giving up home runs at that rate. But let's shift the conversation to some other midweek stuff. South Carolina really needed to beat somebody right now, and it didn't happen last night against Clemson.
Yeah, I was really high on this team a few weeks ago, and I'm about to the point right now that they could not make a regional. I mean, I think they will, but this is just not a good team right now. And they're really struggling. Had a chance to sweep Clemson last night in their series. They played 2 games in February, and the Sunday game was rained out. But this team was 11-0 to start the season, and they're 17-18 in the last 35 games, and they've had a 7-game losing streak in that. They went from 11-0 to 11-7. Really kind of started spiraling even back in February and March. They made a nice recovery and got back in the race, and you're looking like, well, hey, this is the South Carolina that we all know and expect to see play. Great series win over Florida, and then it just, the inconsistencies of this team is just incredible. And they've played some tough games in the West. Their Western Division opponents have been hard and lost at home to Arkansas, lost at home to Mississippi State. They had to go to Ole Miss. I mean, I don't know many other SEC Eastern Division teams that had to take care of that gauntlet, and they got that, and that's tough for them. But they set the tone on the weekend, and it's a bad tone that they set. They're just 1-7 in their SEC opening games, and to win a series, if you start 0-1, it just puts incredible pressure on your team and the pitching staff because you got to win the next two games to win the series. You can't split and go, well, we won the series. No, you lose that first one, and then you've got to win games 2 and game 3, and they've been pretty successful at that. They're 11-5 in games 2 and game 3, but that's not been the case the last 3 weeks for them. They lost game 2 and 3 to Ole Miss. They lost game 2 to Arkansas, and they lost game 2 to Mississippi State. So that's not been what they've been normally doing throughout the season. But just the 1-7, only Auburn has the same record as them in game ones of a series. Both of them 1-7, and then you look at Vanderbilt 7-1, in SEC openers, and so they don't get off to a good start on the weekend, and it puts a lot of pressure on your team to have to win the next 2 games. And the gauntlet of Arkansas, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State, 3 weekends in a row and 2 of them at home, that didn't help them either. But this team has really struggled, and they're going to be in the middle of the pack, in the SEC, and obviously playing on that first day, and get a tough draw, obviously in the second day, because they're going to have to play one of the top 4 seeds. But it's a team that's not headed in the right direction as we get close to the postseason.
If they go 3-3, as ugly as it's been recently, I think they have to get in the NCAA tournament. The RPI is going to be right there. But let's say that this closes disastrously, and for some reason they don't make the NCAAs. What do you think happens with Mark Kingston?
I mean, they're at Kentucky, and they have Tennessee at home. And I could certainly see Tennessee winning 2 out of 3. I could certainly see Tennessee sweeping them, just because Tennessee's in the middle of trying to win the SEC. I don't know this, Kentucky, Kentucky's a hard team to kind of figure out. Can they go to Kentucky and win a series there? They've been inconsistent under Kingston a little bit. And looking at this, Kentucky's beaten South Carolina in 3 of the last 4 series. They've been a little inconsistent. I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to make a change, but it wouldn't shock me. I've heard some things, out there that, maybe it's not working for them. They were really good. They were a really dominant program under Ray Tanner. Won back-to-back World Series. I mean, they hosted a regional every year. They hosted super regionals every year. Never lost a postseason game at home. Ray decides to take the AD job and makes Chad Holbrook the coach. And I mean, we're only talking 10 years here now, Chris. 2012 to 2021. They've gone from winning national championships to not even making a regional. They lost their first. They had regional. They lost a regional at home. They end up going on the road for super regional. They end up losing a regional at home, going on the road for a regional, and not even hosting a regional. And now they're in a situation where you're 12-12, and you go. If they go 2-4 the next 2 weekends, can they get in at 14-16? I mean, I think they can, but they're certainly not spiraling in the right direction. And I don't know that they're going to make a change. I think I would be a little surprised if they did, but they're just not trending in the right direction right now. And they've kind of struggled of late. I mean, I don't know what kind of team they would have had last year, because nobody knows, but I think 2 years ago when we last played in the tournament, I mean, it came down to the last game of the season, and they were in a battle with Kentucky and Alabama for the last spot, and they got in because somehow they won a game at Mississippi State, and Kentucky and Alabama both laid eggs all weekend long and didn't win any games, and they got in. I mean, this is a team that's been in the SEC tournament every year since they've been in the league. 1992, the only team that's gone every year. So they've got that on their side, and they're going to get in this year. But it's just spiraling in the wrong direction for me right now at 17 and 18. And, I don't know what Coach Tanner's thinking. I mean, I know he's very high on Mark Kingston. He's very happy to get him there. But it's just not been exactly, I don't think, what they thought it would be since he arrived.
Okay, D1 baseball comes out with its field of 64 projections on Monday. Last 5 in: Georgia, Kentucky, Tulane, Oklahoma State, Maryland. First 5 out: Alabama, LSU, UC Santa Barbara, San Diego, and Virginia. LSU has since made it a little bit more interesting. LSU gets a 16-8 win in only 7 innings over a Louisiana Tech team that D1 has hosting as the number 14 overall seed in the tournament. So LSU just suddenly, and again, the schedule gets easier the last 2 weekends. Alabama at home, at A&M. I think that probably loser goes home of that Alabama series, quite possibly in Baton Rouge this weekend, but we'll see. But the Tigers have made it very interesting, and RPI this morning is at 20. So, boy, what do we make of LSU?
Well, I think they have a chance. The last 2, we said this a couple of weeks ago. They got Auburn, Alabama, and Texas A&M, and we like their chances of getting to Hoover, and I still do. They got a 2-game lead on A&M. They got a 3-game lead and a tiebreaker on Auburn, and they've got a 4-game lead on Missouri. I think it'd be very difficult for LSU not to make it to Hoover. So that gives you a chance to get in the tournament. And I don't think they can go 6-0 the last 2 games. I mean, they haven't done that yet this year. But 13 and 17, then we're getting into kind of some dicey numbers and what kind of a run did they make in Hoover. I mean, they have a good RPI. They have a good following. They have some good wins. That game last night against La Tech, they're down like 4 or 5 to nothing and came back and won 16-8. They did stop the game in the 7th inning. It was raining, not hard enough to stop the game for rain, but the lightning and everything. And it, just didn't make any sense to stay out there till 10, 11, 12 o'clock and wait out some lightning. And I think they called the game fairly quickly. And I think that was probably the right thing to do. I mean, I don't think Louisiana Tech felt like they were going to come back from 8 down, and they still had runners second and third in the inning, LSU in the inning, and still had not they were not out of the inning yet. And I don't think they thought they could make up 10 runs in 2 innings, and if it were 8 runs or 10 or whatever it got to. So I think they made the right call there, but that was a good win for them last night. And they're going to be one of those, teams that's, they're going to be right on the line, I think, really tight, trying to figure out how to get in. But if you look at them, you talk about South Carolina spiraling in the wrong direction. I think LSU's trending in the right direction with, they got a series win at Ole Miss. They lost 2 out of 3 at home to Arkansas. Okay, who hadn't done that? And they go to Auburn and win and say they beat Alabama at home and A&M on the road. And then all of a sudden they've won 4 of their last 5 series. And, they've got some good non-conference wins, and they're a draw. I mean, people want to go watch LSU play. I mean, they could send them to Oregon, which they sent them to Oregon State, I think, one year with Northwestern State. And there were LSU fans that went out there, and that was a draw. I mean, they're a draw wherever they go because of the brand LSU. And I still think they got to get above 13 wins. I don't know that they can, but they may be that first team with 13 wins that gets in if they, have a good run in Hoover. But they're certainly a very, very, very interesting team, the way they're playing right now and the way that things are going for them. And I'll say this, if they get in a regional, there's not a lot of people going to be really excited to run into Landon Marceau and A.J. Levis. And Mikhail Hilliard has pitched really well the last couple of weekends for them. He's been that good Sunday guy. I mean, they could have won Sunday. They lost 2-1 on a walk-off, and he pitched extremely well. So that's a scary team headed into the last 2 weekends of the season, and you never know, they could win the last 6, and if get to 15-15 in this league, and if they get to 15-15, watch out, they're gonna cause somebody a lot of problems in a regional.
Let's switch to Alabama a minute. I got a chance to see the Crimson Tide here this weekend. I really wanted to see that game played on Sunday because Alabama was throwing Landon Green, who looked pretty good in the first inning. Vanderbilt was throwing Christian Little, who's really talented, but I don't think he's ready for that role. Frankly, I'm not sure how much either team was heartbroken to have that game canceled, given the pitching situations both places, with both being without an ace. And I know Vanderbilt's got some injuries, some other places. Alabama's down another starter too. So it's just a weird deal all around. But what are your thoughts on how Alabama pieces its pitching together? Tyler Ross got bombed in Nashville. Dylan Smith, it was interesting to sit behind home plate and watch him because you can kind of see why he's good when he's good. His breaking stuff is really good, but it took him an inning or two to get there. And in the meantime, Vanderbilt just hit his fastball, and it was enough to do him in. Green is a kid who's pitched well when he's pitched, but you don't know what that looks like when you stretch him out against SEC play. Do you think Alabama's got enough pitching to connect the dots between now and Selection Monday?
Not really. I think they're going to be one of the teams that's left out. I don't see them winning either of their last 2 series. I don't see them winning a game against Mississippi State at home. They might be able to, snag one at LSU this weekend just simply because LSU hasn't been able to sweep anybody just yet. So they don't have that experience of sweeping a team. Alabama's played pretty good on the road too. So that helps them, in some regards, going to LSU this weekend. You look at Alabama, they're 5-6 on the road. That's not awful, but LSU's 3-9 at home. That's not LSU. LSU would be more 9-3, 10-2. So if Alabama's going to win a series and get a couple of wins and get moving, that's going to be where it has to happen. What worries me for Alabama is if I don't think they would have beaten Vanderbilt on Sunday. So I think they'd be 11-13 had they played. But 2 wins at LSU, you're only 13-17. If they just get one, they're going to finish 12 they'll finish 12-9, I guess 12-17. If they just get the one, because I don't see them winning a game against Mississippi State, and I just don't think they'll have enough to, get in the tournament. I know they've had some issues on the mound, and they've had some position players. Drew Williamson, was injured this weekend at first base, and they played Davis Eller some at first base. So I know they've got some issues there. They've had a lot of injuries, but everybody's had injuries. I mean, it's a long season. And I'd be interested to talk to people who are medically inclined. I'm not that person. But I wonder how much not having a season last year, not having kids go play summer ball. For the most part, these kids sat for 7 or 8 months without really playing and doing a lot, and then coming in the fall. And so they missed a year, and now, they're not used. It's been 2 years since they've actually gone through a full season. And I wonder how much of that has to do with that. How much,
Yeah. That's exactly where I was going to go next, because you're seeing injuries at the major league level, you're seeing them at the college level, and it just kind of turned into a little bit of a nightmare for everyone.
It has. I mean, you look at Ole Miss; they've had people, they've had a ton of injuries. Alabama's had a ton of injuries. Vanderbilt's had a ton of injuries. I think the one thing I want to look this up, and I'll try to have it tomorrow or Friday. I think Tennessee is the only SEC team to start every guy on the mound Friday, Saturday, and Sunday this year. I don't think anybody else has done that.
That sounds about right.
I don't think anybody else has. I think they've gone Dallas, Heflin, and Tidwell every night, and I don't think anybody else has remotely even come close to that. And but Liam Spence has had some injuries. I think Ferguson's had some nagging injuries. Pavoloni's been injured a little bit. They may have had some injuries in the bullpen. They've had their share of injuries. But and then you look at Tennessee and you go, well, gee, they're 17-7 and they're leading the SEC. Well, why? I wonder why. Because their 3 starters have answered the bell every time. They've gone out there every night. I think they're the only team that you can say that about. I know Leiter's missed a start. Florida's bounced their guys around. South Carolina, I know, has. Georgia went staff night for 2 months. Kentucky's missed starts. Missouri's changed theirs. Arkansas's tinkered with theirs. Mississippi State's changed theirs around. Ole Miss has had injuries. Alabama's had injuries. LSU's had injuries. A&M's had injuries. Auburn's had a nightmare. So I'd be willing to say we're right on that, to say that that's the only team. But it's really strange at how many injuries people had. Greenhill and Owen at Auburn have been hurt, and Dustin Signs at Texas A&M's had some injuries, and some COVID issues. LSU's lost Jaden Hill. Doty's missed some time at third base with some injuries. I mean, there's a lot of key guys out there that have been hurt. And I just wonder how much of that is factored in that, when they played in February, that's the first time they'd played in almost 11 months competitively, and not had a summer where you go play. And, because it's hard to go and just sit. I mean, you can go out there and throw the ball against, with some guys and get together and work out and do your lifts and different stuff like that. But you got to play. I mean, you got to go hit against a guy that can live pitching, and you got to face hitters, and you got to catch balls off a bat that, ground balls and fly balls in game situations. It's one thing to go out and hit fungos. It's another thing to play first base and catch a line drive with a guy on third and 1 out, and that's the winning run. I mean, you got to play, and you got to do that. And I just wonder how much of that's factored into this year. It just seems to me like an inordinate amount of injuries all across the league, and I just wonder how much that factors in.
Yeah, I think if people have listened to the podcast, they know that I'm in Nashville or the Nashville area. You're in Tuscaloosa. So we go to our local ballparks, and a lot of what we see, obviously, is what is right in front of us here. So I'm out there. I'm in Hawkins Field for Vanderbilt's 2 games with Alabama. I'm actually out there last night for a midweek game with North Alabama that almost put me to sleep. But I'm watching the lineups come out. I'm like, okay, no Isaiah Thomas in right this weekend. Find out he's hurt for the second or third time with a hand injury. He's back last night. He's their starting right fielder. Cooper Davis, who's been hurt now the lineup twice, is back in left, which he kind of lost to Jack Bolger because Bolger's now hurt. I'm looking at the lineup last night, and they've got Dominic Keegan, who's their everyday first baseman. He missed a couple of weeks. He's now catching last night because their top 2 catchers, C.J. Rodriguez and Max Romero, are banged up. We know about Jack Leiter. It's just like you look everywhere, and that's a program that, like, if they've usually got 1 or 2 major injuries this late in the year, that's I'm not even going to say par for the course because they've been pretty healthy. I mean, but that's like the worst case scenario. And I'm sitting there looking at them, and we hadn't seen Ethan Smith in 6 weeks. They think they get him back next weekend. But I think it is that way a lot of places, as you said. It just has really wreaked havoc with everybody and the rosters this year.
Yeah, I think the teams that, can navigate the best through these injuries, is going to win. And it goes back to what we said a minute ago. Tennessee's the only team that's started all 3 starters every weekend. I'm even saying back to week 1 when they play these non-conference series. I think they're the only team that's done that, and they've been fortunate on the mound. And I think the teams that can navigate the injuries. I mean, one injury doesn't kill you. I mean, you got 30 guys and you play 56 games, somebody's going to get hurt and somebody's going to miss significant amount of time. I mean, it's just going to happen. But when the 1 becomes 2 and 2 becomes 4 and, they start piling up on you and and a lot of these teams don't have the depth that some of the other teams do. And when you lose, 2 starters in your rotation or 2 guys you think are going to be starters in your rotation, or your hot-hitting first baseman who's tearing up the world goes out for a couple of weeks, or your second baseman, breaks a bone in his hand, or your outfielder pulls a hamstring or whatever. And I think it really takes its toll on you. You can only dress 27 on the road and 30 at home, but you have to designate 3 that are not active, in SEC games when you're at home. So you have a limited roster, and you only can have 35 anyway, but I think that's been relaxed a little bit because of the COVID. So some of these teams may have a little bit more than, 35 on the roster. But, injuries are a part of it, and it's been a part of it. And it happens in football and it happens in basketball. But I'm trying to think, I don't really remember during football season, I don't remember a lot of guys missing a lot of time in football with injuries. I mean, I don't remember teams, in football this season. Do you, SEC teams, Chris, do you remember any? I mean, I'm sure there's some significant guys, but I don't remember. I mean, I know Jalen Waddle went down for Alabama and missed the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season for them. But I mean, that just shows you how good Devontae Smith really was, because he picked up his slack and Waddle's slack. He's the only guy out there that they were going to throw it to, and the 3 guys covering him still couldn't cover him. So, I mean, I know that was a loss for Alabama, but it really wasn't a loss, because the guy that they had out there was still the best player and dominated anyway. But I mean, there's other teams that probably that would say, well, we had this guy hurt, or, lineman missed a game or 2 and stuff. But it's just hard to navigate a season, when you got this many injuries, going on, and as we do in the league with all of our teams. But I think the team that can navigate it the best, is the one that's going to come out on top.
No, I think you made a good point. And of course, baseball and football are a little different. Sometimes not taking the pounding of all the hitting and things, which I think that you had spring practice shorten things a little bit. You had, I think they probably didn't get in as much work in the fall and the summers. The schedule was shorter, so there were less opportunities for people to get hurt. In baseball, it's kind of the opposite, because now a lot of the issue you're seeing is it because there hasn't been practice and wasn't summer ball. And sometimes for pitchers that works the other way, right? Because it puts more pitches on your arm. But there's also a certain amount of conditioning you need, or else you get hurt if you're not in enough shape to pitch or whatever. That's when injuries start to happen. So it almost works in opposite ways for baseball than it does football.
Yeah, of course, most teams, I don't think anybody had a spring practice last year, and I know they couldn't get into conditioning and stuff till like June or July, and their fall camp was reduced. I mean, I think fall camp has kind of been watered down anyway, with the way they do things and how they, you have to have so many days of acclimation, and you can't have pads in back-to-back days, and you can't have 2-a-days in back-to-back days. And where were these rules when I was working for Gene Stallings? Because that certainly didn't happen back in those days. I mean, you had that acclimation where you had the 2 days at helmets and shoulder pads and shorts, and then 2 days you got in pads, and then you went in full gear. And I was trying to think. I tell people this. They talk about how grueling fall camp is. I said, dude, we started at 6 a.m. on a Friday morning, and our next day off was 11 days from then. He gave them the next Sunday off, and we practiced twice a day every day. And when Ray Perkins was at Alabama and I was with him, we practiced 3 times a day. We had a kicking practice from noon to 1:15 every day. We were on the field 3 times a day, and not always in full gear and stuff. But I mean, it's changed over the last 20 or 30 years. Now you can't have 2 days in a row of pads, and you can't practice twice a day for more than 2 days at a time. You can only go 2 days twice today, and then you can only do 1 tomorrow. And it's a lot different than it used to be. Of course, I'm sure the guys in the 40s and 50s and 60s say, well, we didn't have water and all that. I mean, I know it's changed over the years, but they still had to overcome some obstacles in football this year too, with not being able to get out on the field and do some things. And I think you look at the I think you look at college football season and the teams that navigated the injuries and the COVID protocols the best were the ones that, maybe save Ohio State because their league kind of messed a lot of stuff up, only playing 6 or 7 games. And they're fresh when they get in the playoffs because you've only played 6 or 7 games as opposed to an SEC team who's played 11 or 12. And, but of course that didn't matter in that game for Ohio State. When they played Alabama, that didn't matter. But, you look at, a guy like Nick Saban and you figure, well, if anybody's going to master this COVID and master this stuff, it's going to be him. And he missed some games, and he had some staff miss some games. I don't know that he had any players miss any, but then you look and here he is standing on the the crown of college football at the end with another national championship. I think the teams that can handle the injuries and handle the COVIDs and all that stuff the best, like you see Nick Saban did it for football. And the teams that did it in basketball, that were able to get in those bubbles and stay in those bubbles and play all those games. We didn't. I mean, Blake, we didn't miss a ton of games in basketball season either in this league. I mean, we played all but 2 football games. We played most every basketball game. We hadn't missed a baseball game this year except for Kentucky. Opening series with North Carolina, and then their game with Moorhead last night was canceled because Moorhead had COVID. But we hadn't missed a lot of baseball. We hadn't missed a conference baseball game because of COVID. I think one softball series was postponed and then rescheduled because of COVID. But I still say, I mean, the SEC got it right, and they did it right. They did it the right way. They didn't panic. They didn't say, "We're not going to play. We're just gonna." And then let's calm down. Let's take our time. Got plenty of time to decide all this. We don't have to make a decision April the 6th on what's going to happen in September. We don't have to make a decision in September about what's going to happen in May. Let's just chill out, take our time. And I think they did a good job with that. And I think the coaches and the players and the staffs and the medical teams and everybody, I think they did what they were supposed to do. And now you see why we're playing and we're competing and volleyball, Kentucky volleyball, won a national championship this year. Volleyball season was kind of divided over 2 semesters. Hadn't been that way before. And that's the last sport the SEC had never won a national championship in. Now they got one in every sport they compete in. And, Kentucky was able to navigate their season and play through these teams in volleyball and all these other sports that everybody's been able to navigate and get through. And, injuries are a part of it and just have to persevere the last couple of weeks. I mean, I'm not worried about COVID the last few weeks, but just teams just have to be, stay healthy and try to see how many teams can get in the tournament and get into, maybe get to Omaha.
Barry, any parting thoughts on baseball before we end the show today?
Well, I think this weekend we talk more tomorrow and certainly Friday. We just have one Thursday game tomorrow night, and it's not real exciting. Missouri taking on Mississippi State. Missouri's lost 9 in a row, 5-19 in the league. So the Thursday night game probably not going to excite a lot of people, but I think the one series this weekend, and we can talk more about it, tomorrow and certainly into Friday, is Arkansas at Tennessee. I think that may be the marquee series in the country this weekend. 2 top 5 teams going at it in Knoxville. Pretty much, I guess whoever wins that series, whether it be Tennessee or Arkansas, they're going to have a leg up in winning the overall SEC championship. So I think that's a key series, not only just in the league, but nationally, that I think a lot of people are excited about. And they play Friday night on SEC Plus. They play Saturday at noon Eastern on the SEC Network. And then the Sunday game is an SEC Plus game as well. And, Ben Beatty in the SEC office sent out the updated standings last night and updated scores. And it just, I've been reading it this morning, but it just hit me as you asked me any parting thoughts. Yeah, he's got the entire remaining schedule on one piece of paper, and that's sad. I mean, we're down to almost, 2 weeks left. Everybody's got 6, 7, or 8 games left. So you are not many games left on the old schedule. And, come next week, we're going to be talking about the last weekend of the season. And, 2 weeks from yesterday, we're going to be in Hoover playing the SEC tournament. And 2 weeks from today, 4 teams are already going to be going home. So it's really gone by fast, but really excited this weekend for Arkansas and Tennessee. I'm really excited to see that and see that series, and also see how maybe Ole Miss could overcome the loss of Gunnar Hoglund, as Vanderbilt comes in, and you may have more insight than this than I do, but maybe is Jack Leiter back this weekend? Is he still on the shelf? What, the status for him as they go to Oxford this weekend?
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear that myself. I don't know. I talked to someone last night, and it was kind of a guess, and the opinion I got was 50-50. I would not be shocked if they held him out for another weekend, just because you got so much ahead on postseason and so much at stake there. But we will wait and see. And by the way, when we get to tomorrow, I spent some time yesterday projecting out what I think the SEC tournament bracket is going to look like. So we'll share that tomorrow. In any case, boy, it's going to be so much fun. We've got postseason hosting bids coming up. The NCAA is going to announce its 20 candidates for the 16 hosting spots. We should have that within a day or two, so there'll be that to talk about. But in any case, whatever there is to talk about, we will be talking about it here. If you were listening, please do us a favor. Subscribe to us where you get your podcast. Leave us a nice rating and a review. That helps us get found. Check out our site at southeastern14.com. I've got some hitter and pitching power rankings that are coming up. And, of course, we will keep you updated on anything and everything that happens in and around the SEC in football, basketball, and baseball. Thank you for listening to the Wednesday edition of the 14 podcast. We will see you again on Thursday.